pleased to introduce our next panelist, Mr. Professor Niccolò Geri, who will explain us how sushi became popular in Italy. Good afternoon, Professor Geri.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Here we are. So thanks for your invitation to this event. It's my first invitation to a symposium, so it's the first time for me. And thank you to Stefania Viti, who has already introduced me in her works. And I can say that my part in this symposium is a trade union with Stefania. I got my degree in 2013 with a thesis about sushi, because as Stefania said, there was no technical essays about the diffusion of sushi in Italy. So I started a work talking about, firstly, about its history, and then talking about sushi as a means, a way to think how food can be a means of transport for foreign cultures in another place. So for this event, I prepared a PowerPoint to share with you. One moment, please. Can you see it? Here we are.
Yes.
Okay, so how sushi went popular in Italy. So here we are. As NUETZENADEL and TRENTMANN wrote, food and globalization are inseparable. Food plays an important role in the creation of national and local identities, and it is often the cause of political contentions, wars, and protests. Nevertheless, there are few written articles which focus on global effects linked to food consumption and distribution, subjecting them to other factors, such as financial markets, politics, and migration. But food plays a key role in the globalization and is as important as finance, politics, and industry. Human beings can survive without money, without politicians, without cars and other commodities, but they can't go far without food. So, since food is about survival, it allows us to understand the social norms and the identity of groups of individuals. Saying that we are what we eat, it is linked not only to a chemical, biological aspect of food consumption, but it also outlines that our society is deeply influenced by its own diet. Food, in fact, requires storage, utensils, space, recipes, and communication. It is not only linked to preparing a meal, because thanks to food and its consumption, human beings can create communal relations. Food is also a social status marker, with regards not only to Michelin stars in modern restaurants, but also to the consumption of foreign products in the past, especially during the age of European colonial empires, which began in 1493. The first colony, for example, in the New World, Hispaniola, the modern Haiti, in that colony, the consumption of European food was a common practice amongst those social groups who were keen to acquire an higher status. Food is also a national identity marker, because after the War of Independence, American people refused to drink tea like British people, replacing it with coffee. So food is about culture, and as culture is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. Culture, for example, can be compared to the work of spiders and bees. If culture moves as do spiders, who work for themselves making webs only to catch their own meals, it cannot create communication between people. The same is for food. Food is not an end in itself, but a means to an end. As bees allow people to make candles from their wax and sweet from their honey, food allows people to communicate, to develop knowledge, and to spread science and technology. In this way, it creates a link between culture and society. Food, in fact, is not to be seen as a mere commodity, but as a symbol which tells us a story about its creator and its origin. Only with its history, food and commodities in general can obtain a value and can be considered on a different point of view, not linked to the economy or finance. So, the meaning of and the value of food lies in its own history, and the value related to the consumption of the same food is different from place to place. For example, during the War of Independence, coffee was considered a drink for slaves, since it was produced mainly in Brazil and drunk by people working on the coffee plantation. As a symbol of slavery in South America, it became a national drink in North America in opposition to English tea. So food is not a mere commodity, but it embodies a meaning, a value which describes us, the history of a society. Let's think again about the War of Independence in America and the destruction of tea thrown into the Boston Harbor during the Boston Tea Party in 1773. Why tea and not something else? Tea was the symbol of the British Empire, which had colonized India, Sri Lanka, and other places, and which was characterized by tea plantations and the consumption of tea. The consumption of this beverage was a status symbol linked to the supremacy of Great Britain as a colonial power. For this reason, destroying a load of tea meant refusing that supremacy. And after the end of the War of Independence, tea was then substituted in the USA by coffee, a beverage drunk by slaves in plantations, to symbolize the birth of a free country without control of the British Empire. The global system offers us a lot of products linked to other countries, and those products can be abstract, such as holidays, ideas, habits, and concrete, such as clothes, vehicles, and food. For these reasons, some scholars argue that globalization is a phenomenon old as humanity itself. Its birth lies with the first migration of humans from Africa and the invention of agriculture. But it was only in the period between the 15th and the 17th century that this phenomenon arrived to join other parts of the world. Indeed, till that period, a lot of cultural and economic movements, such as Hellenism, Christianity, and capitalism, were born. Nevertheless, these movements only influenced a few parts of the known world. The diffusion of globalized food and consequently the increment of restaurants and shops, marketing, machinery, knowledge, and tools linked to that product are a part of globalization. So, food is not a mere commodity, but an artifact of human ingenuity, a creative product shaped through the accumulation of knowledge, skills, and experience. Food does not travel only in response to consumer demands or by the will of multinational corporations, but also thanks to food creators. And so, sushi, talking about sushi, sushi is one of the most famous dishes of Japanese cuisine found in Euro-American countries. And it is not an exaggeration to say that nearly every country in the world has sushi restaurants. Between 1970 and 1990s, more or less, sushi arrived in the metropolis centers such as London and Amsterdam, in high-level Japanese restaurants and very expensive hotels attended by businessmen and Japanese tourists. Since it was considered a dish of haute cuisine, of haute Japanese cuisine, it was very expensive. With the creation of sushi bars and low-cost sushi, the diffusion in other countries such as the USA and Europe, sushi has increased as a business. So in restaurants in Italy, which are linked to their territories with local products and local loyal customers, seemed to be forced to modify their menu with a lot of ingredients coming from Eastern traditions. Japan, ethnic restaurants such as Chinese, noting this fashion, are now inserting typical Japanese food dishes such as sushi in their menu. Furthermore, the globalization of sushi also represents the globalization of other sectors linked to this product. For example, the fish market, where more and more fish, such as red tuna, are now sold, and the job market, where more and more sushi chefs are required. Nowadays, people eat and make sushi, increasing its success and popularity alongside haute cuisine and popular foods. In fact, the Great Recession of 2008-2010, which affected haute cuisine restaurants in Italy, seemed to have been one of the key factors of sushi as a healthy, low-cost food. Supermarkets also started to create little corners for sushi and sell ingredients in order to permit customers to create sushi by themselves at home. Japanese rice, nori seaweed, rice vinegar, and wasabi appear next to pasta and tomato sauce. Then we can say that sushi has spread to a lot of sectors linked to its own business, changing the appearance of our cities, our diet, the way of making healthy, low-cost food, and the idea of making something popular which originally belonged to a limited group. So sushi, if we have to approach to this food, sushi can be seen as a cultural object, sushi chefs as cultural producers, sushi restaurants as particularly social wares, and a consumer as someone who receives that cultural object. These four elements are the base of Griswold's so-called cultural diamond, from which it is possible to make an analysis of a culture through a practical approach. Since the term culture is a little bit ambiguous and abstract, Griswold proposed an analysis of culture by focusing on the cultural object, okay? So from this diamond, from this scheme. So globalization is also linked to the concept of familiar and hybridization, of mixing, okay? So by using Griswold cultural diamond, my report focused mainly on the role of sushi producers and consumers. And by doing an interview with them, I could realize that in Italy, sushi is produced mainly by three kinds of producers. Sushi restaurants managed by Japanese staff with a sushi man in Itamae who follows seasons while preparing their menu. So each season there is a different kind of sushi on the menu. Italian restaurants, we changed their menu by inserting sushi or raw fish dishes in their menu by following this fashion, this boom, okay? And then wok sushi chain restaurants or similar, offering the same sushi all year long with a huge selection in their menu. So those three producers attracted 3 different kinds of consumers thanks to their own business strategy and their prices. Then secondly, I did a survey to 100 people trying to collect data about sushi consumers, and then we can see some results. These are the questions I asked them. So how many people work for you? How many customers can you host in your restaurant? Who are your customers? How did your chef learn to cook sushi? What kind of sushi is mainly eaten by your customers? How do you promote your restaurant? How much does a customer usually spend for his or her meal? What prices do you offer in your Japanese menu? Those are questions for the producers, and those are the results of the answer of the survey for the consumers. So in this case, I asked which elements influence your choice in a restaurant. So as you can see, the 20%, the price, a big part of them, the 34%, fish quality and so on, restaurant appearance, friends, suggestions, comments about the restaurant's dish appearance, and just a small 17%, I don't eat sushi. So these show that many people in that period, we are in 2013 when I did this report. So few people in that period didn't eat sushi or have not yet eaten sushi. So the second one, the other questions were about the knowledge of Japanese cultural elements, as amongst those 100 people, the 89%, for example, read manga. The 75 watch anime, the 77%, well, know what mangas are or know what is an anime, knows martial arts, knows what is a dorama, knows about shodo, knows something about tea ceremony, and just a small 4% has not a knowledge about those elements. This instead is about activities practiced by that group. So the 70% read manga, the 86% watches anime, the 28 do martial arts, the 25 watch dorama, and just the 6 practice shodo, or the 22 participated to a tea ceremony, and so on. So that gave an idea of the diffusion of Japanese typical cultural elements linked to sushi consumption. This is about place of consumption in 2013. So the majority, the big part of them consumed sushi in wok sushi chain and restaurants or similar, and just the 34 in Japanese restaurants. But the important thing in this graph is about at home by myself. Some of them prepare sushi by themselves, or in the other case, they use takeaway sushi. And probably that situation now can be completely changed because of the pandemic. Because of the pandemic, we cannot go to consume sushi in a restaurant. But in this period, many people for sure order it thanks to delivery service, or they buy ingredients in the supermarket and prepare it at home. On the Amazon, for example, you can find Sushi Bazooka. Is a machine. It's similar to a bazooka, to a pistol, in which you insert cooked rice and other ingredients to make a maki, a sushi roll. Then that is about how to learn homemade sushi. So the big part of them watch the tutorial on the internet, but a good 12% and deep their knowledge by reading books. Some others asking to Japanese friends, for example. And by asking some questions about Japan, about sushi, the 55% of those people gave correct answers, while the 15% gave wrong answers. Just the 30% didn't know. So a big part of them have a knowledge about what they were eating. So the results of this study suggest that the diffusion in Italy of sushi has derived from 4 elements. Firstly, the presence of different kinds of restaurants which propose different products. These different restaurants have different business strategies, which allow sushi to be presented in different menus with different prices. Secondly, restaurants have the merit for having understood the interest of the consumers for sushi, and their different business strategies were created to satisfy what their customers needed. Basic needs such as quality, price, and taste have been used by restaurants as a foundation in order to develop their business strategies, which involve not only price, but also the building of the restaurant and its internal organization. Thirdly, the ability of sushi men is understanding the taste of their customers and allowing sushi to be modified to be eaten sooner or later by people skeptical of eating raw fish. Sushi men also study the particularity of local ingredients and by using them attract many customers. Fourthly, the role of choice. Today, there is not only one kind of restaurant offering sushi, and all the restaurants analyzed in my research do not offer only sushi in their own menu. Sushi consumers' behavior during the Great Recession is closely related to the frequency with which people ate out, which according to interviews has decreased. At the same time, the Great Recession has affected not only consumers, but also chefs who adapted their strategies to the new context. Nevertheless, thanks to the creation of loyal customers, sushi restaurants continue to sell sushi. The interviews revealed profound differences in the organization of each restaurant and in the work behind the creation. Those differences suggested that even if you can eat sushi anywhere, sushi is not the same. Even with the presence of low-cost sushi restaurants, frequency in which consumers go out to eat sushi has declined, and this is confirmed by some from the survey. What the study suggests is that the Great Recession has not stopped the consumption of sushi, but it has focused consumers' attention on their budget, changing their habits in terms of frequency of consumption. The study revealed that the diffusion of sushi amongst consumers is not accompanied by the diffusion of other Japanese cultural elements, such as anime and manga. But that does not mean that there is a correlation between the consumption of sushi and the interest for other Japanese cultural elements. So, since Griswold defined the cultural object as a shared significance embodied in a form, this study revealed that sushi could also be considered a cultural object. Behind the consumption of sushi, there is its history, the work of chefs who permitted receivers, so consumers, to appreciate this food, and there is the creation of particular place of consumption with the purpose to attract and to satisfy their own customers. This study showed that consumers, in the number of participants to survey, they were aged between 18 and 35 years were in total the 86%. Although we could find older people who ate sushi, this means that those young consumers in that period will be the older consumers of the future. And the forecast is that the consumption of sushi will increase in the future as it does. So answers to the survey showed that consumers consider sushi a valid alternative to other meals consumed outdoor, and they linked values such as health to this dish, and those elements seem to encourage people to go out and eat sushi. So this is my presentation. I use some references to talk to you about this matter. I don't know if there are some questions. I don't know. Georgia, help me.
Thank you very much, Professor Geri, for your super interesting panel.
You're welcome.
So we have 1 minute left. So if someone has a very quick question, please ask it now, or please make use of the chat here below. Yeah, as you mentioned before, the pandemic is having a very big impact in the food consumption, especially sushi in Italy.
That report was written in 2013 when I got my degree. We were just went out from the economic recession, originated in 2008 in the USA and finished more or less in 2012. So the restaurants were deeply hit by that crisis. Now there is another crisis, and I think it's worse than that one, because people are forbade to go out for a meal. In that period, people could, if they had money, to go out for a meal. So I think if we are thinking about the diffusion of sushi, I think in this particular period, there is another actor in this scene, which is the delivery service. So that allowed people to eat not homemade food and eating food bought from other places at home and supermarkets. Many people, thanks to, in 10 years, I think people knowledge about sushi is deepened thanks to books such as Stefania's books or TV programs or tutorial on YouTube. So thanks to this knowledge, also the homemade sushi had been increased in that period thanks to the pandemic. So that maybe is a different situation, even bad as bad as the previous one.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay.